on topic of today, we touched on it a little bit with Jordy here, but I kind of want to get a full discussion on this Perk news because it's a massive deal. I mean, it is we talked about the retention, and Kelly talked about it, and obviously LSU didn't retain everyone that was kind of on the list, but getting Nussmeier and Harold Perkins back is massive. That's two huge gets. And the piece of video Lloyd's about to play it was outstanding.
Very good. It's very Perk.
It was beautiful.
I'm back.
MJ.
Awesome.
I mean, absolutely electric.
That was Saturday morning that the news was announced. I was in West Monroe. We have that tournament for basketball, obviously. So we're at the hotel. I'm getting ready. The Josh Thompson news breaks. So I'm hurried up on my phone. I'm tweeting that out. And then I finish getting dressed and, whatever. And my phone starts buzzing again. So I pick it up. Harold Perkins come back. And so I'm double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking everywhere. I see LSU post the video. And so I was like, okay. So I put the news out real quick. And then I went back and watched the video. And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, that's awesome.
And that's what, I mean, that I can understand. Actually, I don't understand this. The conversation that has been, I feel like people didn't think Perk was going to come back to LSU, so they had started to play these mental gymnastics.
No,
so
I didn't.
I didn't either. Well, I mean,
I guess I can tell my theory now that it's over.
Not even worth saying.
But they all wanted to hear it. They wanted the theory.
You can say it if you want now, I guess.
My theory.
And if it happens now, it's my fault.
Now that Perk is officially back, I'm going to tell my theory.
Or it could be a Keyshawn Rudy situation.
God, it could be.
Yeah, so just keep it until week one.
Until week one? You mean hold it until Clemson?
Yeah, the ultimate tease.
Okay.
But
keep teasing.
There were people that whenever Perk went down and you started to see the LSU defense, I guess, quote-unquote, play better, that they were more than happy to not have him come back to LSU. I think that's a terrible take, not only because he's an electric athlete and a phenomenal player, and I do get that maybe he wasn't in the right position. Do you think that they move him to star?
Yes.
And that's a more natural fit? Because we went through a little bit of the edge rushers. They've signed 3 edge rushers. LSU.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think...
And that's just out the portal.
Yeah, I think that 100%. I think, in my opinion, I thought from the jump when they first introduced the star position saying that was going to be a thing, I thought that should have been more Perk. I thought they made it for Perk.
Right.
Just because it's a star is essentially a safety linebacker conglomerate,
hybrid.
And that's kind of what Perk is. So, I mean, I would assume he probably, that weight that he put on to play middle linebacker ahead of last season, I would assume that they want him to slim that down just to get him back to the star. But there's definitely credence to when Perk was out, it did look like everyone was in their natural position. Like the defense did look much more organized. Players looked more comfortable. Circling the Ole Miss game. Like I think everyone was in, a position where they fit. I think was probably the biggest knock against Perk earlier in the year. That was the biggest change, was that it went from trying to force Perk into a position versus everyone playing their natural position. And so now with Perk back, I trust Blake Baker to allow everyone to be in their natural position, including Perk. Now, I don't know what specifically that position is for Perk. I don't know if it's linebacker, safety, star, edge rusher. I don't know. But I trust Blake Baker and Harold Perkins to figure that out and to do what's best. But the idea that this LSU defense was better off without Harold Perkins, I think, is laughable. Yeah, because that's not the case.
And I think people forget what happened when Perkins went out. It became the What Week show. And so now if you imagine, they played sparingly together, but they did in the USC game.
Right.
And that was one of the best performances your defense had, maybe of the year.
Yes.
Like it's up there, like the Ole Miss game for sure, but the USC game.
No, USC's up there.
You started to see like the talent kind of fly around a little bit, where
right.
It's like, oh, there's players everywhere. Now you have Weeks back, you have Perk back, and I do wonder what they do with that middle linebacker position, because Greg Penn's been there for the last, 3 years, and you haven't really seen anybody else play that spot aside from a fleeting sight of Perk kind of in the middle. But now, I don't know who they move to that. Would they take Whit Weeks at middle linebacker, and you have kind of the same scenario that you had with Perkins, where it's an undersized middle linebacker that gets caught in the wash. And he doesn't do what he does well, whenever he's kind of able to fly around and go get the football, as opposed to taking on offensive linemen, trying to hit pullers, fill gaps, all those things that you have to be a Greg Penn size to be able to do.
Right.
So those are just the questions I have for what they want to do in the linebacker room, because the Pyburns of the world, people immediately thought like Pyburn off the edge, Whit Weeks off the edge. You have the two spicy whites that will no quit in them, and now you add other edge rushers with Patrick Payton and Butler from Nebraska. So it feels like you don't need Perk to come off of the edge. That's why Starr is starting to make a lot of sense, because that was Major Burns.
Right,
and is out, and you have Toviano, who also practiced there, but now he's moving to safety.
Right.
And so
Kylan Jackson was your other star guy. He's headed to TCU. So I mean that
Deshaun Spears at safety.
Right, and Devon Keys got some run at star and played relatively well at the position. But I would assume Whit Weeks is obviously your starting. He's starting middle linebacker.
Defense.
He is your defense. That was like
Whit
Lloyd said. Whit. West, I think, probably is – I don't know if he's going to step up and be the starter with Penn leaving. I don't know if that's kind of the shuffle for Blake Baker to figure out where to fit Perk, if it is Starr, if he moves Devon Keys, where exactly they all fit in. But I think your linebacker core would most likely be – Whit Weeks, Harold Perkins, Devon Keys is probably your core, and I think there's other Tylen Singleton's name will be in the mix. I think Kalaj Cobbins will be more of a edge rusher than he will be a linebacker, just because that's where, even in fall camp, that's where they were practicing him at more. But I'm going to be interested to see how Blake Baker shuffles the deck and mixes it up, especially with Perk recovering from injury. I don't know what the timeline is on when he'll be back. He's not going to be back for spring football, so I would assume spring football will have a linebacking core that does not include Harold Perkins, and so you'll see a mix of guys there, and then in the spring game you'll see a mix of guys, that same mix of guys, and then into fall camp. It's obviously going to look different, because I would assume that's when Perk will be back. So,
do you think he plays in the first game of the year?
I would say yeah. ACL surgeries aren't.
The timeline is what, 10 months?
Yeah, aren't what they used to be. I would say maybe even shorter than that sometimes, especially with the level of athlete that Perk is. Mm-hmm. We've seen somebody that's that level of an athlete, and just now ACL surgeries are so common. It doesn't take very long for people to recover. So I would assume he'll be back for the start of the year, but, kind of like the same situation with Zai, where I don't know if linebacker or star is a position where you want to rush an ACL back. So if they do, take some time to let him heal, I trust the staff at LSU to figure that out. But I would assume he plays week 1. I mean, what week was the injury this year?
Week 3.
Week 3?
Right.
Or no?
It was
4, UCLA? Week 3 was South Carolina.
It wasn't South Carolina.
It was UCLA was the
Okay,
injury, because he was in the purple, and so I think that was week 4. So, and
you saw how LSU, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but you saw how John Emery, how quickly he came back.
Right.
He had his injury in October.
Yeah, you saw the tale of two with
returns.
Zai and with John, where John, they kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. And with Zai, they played the long game.
And Zai Alexander never really came up to bite him at any point.
At all.
He stayed relatively healthy throughout. I think he had a concussion and was out, maybe missed one game. And he feels confident enough to even play in the bowl game with the coming off the ACL. So you've seen the timeline accelerated for sure. And I would imagine that that's just a conversation they're going to have to continue to have, because I don't think that you can, if he's not be able to do spring ball, or really he starts coming back for the middle of fall.
Yeah.
I don't know if you put all of middle linebacker on him to where he can't practice. And so I think that's where you'll see kind of a mix and mash of what they want to do in the middle. And there's also a world where you go to the portal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that's off the
just to get an established. I mean, I was just looking at like West Weeks is the same size as
Penn.
Yeah, he's an inch taller.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think if Penn would have went down with injury this year, West would have been the guy that filled the role. I mean, you heard it even when Blake Baker was talking about it when he came in with the interview with us. This was kind of off camera, but he didn't understand why West didn't play more prior, to him getting here. And so, I mean, I think there's going to be a role for West as well. But, I mean, this linebacking room in general, you have this freshman class coming in with Jaden Breaker, Charles Ross, obviously the linebacking class from last year. They've got the guys. And so it just kind of falls on Blake Baker's plate of figuring out where to put them. And so I'm going to be very interested to see where all these different pieces kind of fit in, because it's going to be probably one of the bigger storylines going into next year is kind of what that group looks like, where Perk fits. I would say probably will be the biggest storyline going into the offseason.
What?
Where is Perk going to play?
Yeah, where its position plays. And,
yeah.
I mean, you've seen them make this decision relatively quickly. Like whenever Blake Baker was signed and it was, no, he's going to be moving back to inside, and we believe that he can do it. And that's where some people are saying that it's not like they didn't want Perk back. They didn't want him back playing inside. And I just don't.
Which is not.
No, I think that the expectations are so heightened for him to be able to make a play every time he's out there, because that's what happened his freshman year. But he was put in a situation where you talk about Patrick Payton, like that's what happened with him when he had Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. Like he had a defensive line to where you could go out there and make a play because they're not thinking about me as much. And then when it became Harold Perkins in the middle, you kept expecting him to be able to do something, where the previous year he was coming off the edge with, you say it all the time, like B.J. Ojulari. You had defensive linemen that made it a little bit harder for them to key in on just one guy. And so I think you're getting that back with what you have defensively with Harold Perkins in that mix. I think you're better. This might be the best team Brian Kelly fields in his time at LSU.
Yes. I mean, especially team that this is the best team that he's put together, because the 22 defense those were all O guys. That whole entire defense was O guys, really.
Yeah.
BJ, Jaquelin Roy, Ollie Gay, Jay Ward, Micah Baskerville, besides the DBs who were transfer gets, it was those were O guys. So this is the best team that Kelly has put together at LSU.
Yeah.
And so that's why, and I do agree. I think that when you look at the defense that Perk played on in 23 and even this past year, I think that this is a upgraded version. And I think that the reason that Perk's expectations are heightened, or you're right, are because of the attention that he gets. Like if you go back and watch that USC game to start the year, I mean, they were visually, like, it was pretty obvious they were going away from Harold Perkins. Like every time, on the field, they're running away from Harold Perkins.
Because he's a game breaker.
Like they're not going to run straight at the best player on the defense, But that's why you saw against South Carolina, Braden Swinson's able to burst on the scene because the game plan is on number 7. Like that's the number they have circled. So then Swinson was able to catch him off guard. So
with the way that the quarterback position has kind of changed, or how it's been used, with more like if you have Perk for the A&M game, I don't think it goes that way.
Right, it's a QB spy.
Right, and that there's
Jalen Milroe.
Same thing.
Yeah,
where that's your answer, and I think that they got away from that a little bit with how they wanted to use him, where it was literally stalk.
Yeah, I mean,
he
you look
back
at
the Arkansas game.
Yeah, the Arkansas, even Bryce Young. Like he was able to stand there, stalk, go get him.
Whenever they decide to break contain or get outside the pocket, it was Perk, go get him. And that's the kind of athlete that he is. So that's why I would like to see him. I don't want to see him as heavy as he was in the previous year.
No, I definitely think that he slims down and plays that more hybrid spot.
I think it's very exciting, because it was something that was somewhat of a, maybe you get Perk back.
Right.
And I don't think anybody really thought that you would. But then when we talked about it, and you were like, well, he can't really showcase what he does well.
Yeah, he would have been a combine guy. Yeah. And so
massive get for LSU to be able to retain. Like you talk about retention, I was critical of him saying retention and not being able to pretend. Like you saw whether it was Mason
Taylor.
No, I was going to say the previous year.
Oh, Mason Smith,
Jordan Jefferson, all guys that this should be not the hardest conversation in the world to have. But I also think that was a world where LSU wasn't willing to spend what it took to get people back. Right. And now you can see that. While you missed out, Mason Taylor's a pipe dream. What more could he do at LSU that would improve his draft stock? Pipe dream. Yeah. Obviously not Will Campbell.
Yeah. No, I mean the two that you really could retain, you retained.
Yes. Like Ibry Jones.
But I still saw potential for both of them to go. Both Nuss and Perk to leave. I thought it was kind of
50-50.
I thought it sometimes even leaning more towards them going. Like, I thought at one point it was probably 70-30 for Perk. And for Nuss, when I really started to, think about the situation, kind of almost 60-40 Nuss leaving because of the weak quarterback draft class, offensive line leaving, things like that.
Then when that's what I've...
But you're able to win both of those.
Well, yeah, you were able to pretend in a sense, and it was the people that, I think getting a starting quarterback back in the SEC is massive, and then you were able to get back one of the better players in the country to come back and play for you for another year wherever Perk stepped on the scene. He's one of the highest rated recruits in LSU history.
Right.
He doesn't stay for a senior year. He was assumed 3. And so be able to get him back is unfortunate, the reasons why, with injury, but you get that back and you have throw John Emery in the room, and I'm starting to see a lot of Caleb Jackson in these bowl game practices.
Yeah, no, I mean they're making the push to hold on to him. Frank does. I know Frank doesn't want to let him go.
Mm-mm.
He was a raw prospect coming out of high school, and he flashed his freshman year because, similar to Perk, he was able to be put in positions to flash, that. It's very easy to be set up for success when you're catching someone off guard.
Mm-hmm.
When they don't know who 28 is, it's pretty easy to catch them off guard.
Yeah, well, you can see it from whether whoever was calling the game, they're like, Caleb Jackson.
Yeah,
he's out here decapitating people, and then you would see 5 or 6 carries a game, and it was once the word was out, it's watch out for him. He's a game breaker, and then that's where you got the Caden Durham effect of being able to play high-level football in high school. Right. It was a little bit easier for him to step in and almost become a de facto starter.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a world where you run it back with Caden Durham as your 1. Then you have Caleb Jackson.
Your thumper.
A thumper. You have your, what is it? Thunder and Lightning at USC, your Lindell White, Reggie Bush.
Right.
And then
your Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara.
Yeah. Then you have Harlem Berry. You're able to sprinkle in and talk about
catch somebody off guard.
And that's where you start getting very excited about this offensive line room, and then you add the Braylon Moore addition is massive to me.
Huge.
Because now you can move DJ Chester to one of your guard spots, and you can give Paul Mbenga some more time to get ready and develop. And then you add a left tackle, and it's you feel pretty good about the offensive line because there was definitely question marks.
Yes.
If they would have if they just would have stayed pat, there's going to be some growing pains up front.
No, and they won 2 huge portal recruitments when it comes to offensive line.
Yeah,
I mean, Braylon Moore and Josh Thompson were both
not considered for LSU to be the lean.
No, and they were recruited by the top schools in the country, and LSU was able to close both, and that's what the room needed. Going in the offseason, we were talking about Brad Davis has recruited the room well. He's had all these different things. But the guys that he had starting this year had been the starters for 3 years. So there was no experience really besides Chester coming back. And so obviously it was good you were able to get Mbenga some experience. This bowl game will be great experience for Tyree Adams. I saw Cohen Eccles' name coming up at the guard spot. Borderline. More from Mbenga, DJ Chester, and Miles Frazier's obviously still in the mix, but I would assume to see Weston Davis as well.
Right. You start throwing some of the young guys out there.
Yeah, get them some run.
Get some run.
I don't know where Thompson will play on the line. Josh Thompson? What was his position at?
He was a tackle, was he not?
He was a tackle? I don't really. I thought it said interior offensive line.
I might be wrong.
Yeah, it does say interior.
Okay, that's
3.
Fine with me also because
but
I like what Tyree Adams can do on the outside.
But, I trust Brad Davis to get these guys in the right position. I think Tyree Adams is your left tackle.
Me too.
Going into next season. I think that has been the plan. He was your 6th guy this year. Obviously got injured. I think he's your left tackle. So I think really what you have to figure out is almost the right side.
Yeah,
because
Thompson
I think
said he had been recruited to LSU to play offensive guard or if needed offensive tackle.
So, really you have to figure out the right side.
Yeah.
Because I say the left side's probably more at center, Chester left guard, Tyree left tackle. And so really you have to figure out, do you do Thompson at right guard with Weston Davis at right tackle? Weston Banks. I almost said it because it's in my head every time.
Weston Davis at tackle.
Or do you go
Cohen
Eccles at right guard, Thompson at tackle? And so
you'll probably see a mix of all of them.
Yeah, and that's why it's good that you went and got these guys in the portal. Give Brad Davis some